Let's talk about consciousness. I mean, it's got to be the biggest mystery out there, right? What is this feeling, this subjective experience of being you? Well, today, we're going to dive into one really specific and honestly fascinating theory that tries to crack that exact problem. So, yeah, let's just get right to it. What is consciousness? You know, that internal movie playing in your head right now, that feeling of awareness that you're in the driver's seat. We're going to park the philosophy for a minute because we're about to explore a model that looks at this whole thing from a completely different angle. Okay, so here's the core idea. This theory says consciousness isn't some kind of magical mist or cosmic energy. Nope, it's something way more, well, concrete. Think of it as a super specialized piece of software, an app, basically, that evolved to run on the one-of-a-kind hardware we call the human brain. So how in the world does that work?
All right, so to really get this whole software idea, we have to start at the very beginning. And I mean the very beginning. We need to understand the kind of universe this software even grew out of. So, check this out. The theory kicks off with a really wild idea. Before any life, before any brains existed, the universe didn't have labels, you know? There wasn't a rock here and a tree there. It was all just one big seamless thing, an undifferentiated reality. Which means the very concept of an object isn't out there in the world. It's something a mind has to create.
Okay, so how do we get from that big, seamless everything to a mind that can actually think? Well, this theory says the path is totally physical. Step 1, the universe just allows for distinctions to happen. Step 2, fast forward through millions of years of evolution, and you get the insanely complex hardware of the human brain. And that becomes the platform, the machine, where our consciousness software will eventually get to run.
And that brings us right to the blueprint itself. So, if the brain is the computer, what's the code? What's it running? This whole analogy really breaks down into three main layers.
So let's break it down. The hardware, that's easy. That's your physical brain stuff, your neurons. The middleware, that's kind of like the network cables. It's the electrical and chemical signals zipping between all those neurons. And then the software. This is the key. It's what the theory calls an evolving object model, which is basically just a fancy way of saying a collection of collaborating neural patterns.
So what in the world is this object model? Think of it like the brain's entire library of, well, everything. It's how it represents concepts. And I'm not just talking about physical stuff like a lion or a tree. It's also for abstract ideas, like the number 7, or even a tool for figuring out cause and effect. It's basically the internal language the brain uses to piece together its own version of reality. And here's a really cool part. This software isn't just like installed once at birth and that's it. It actually grows with you. The whole network starts forming at conception. Then, at around 5 months old, a really key piece first pops up, a simple monitor object. We'll come back to that. From that point on, the model just keeps evolving, going from basic reflexes to this incredibly complex system that's behind literally everything you think and do.
Let's make this less abstract. What are these mental objects? Well, it could be the specific neural pattern that fires when you see a lion. Or it could be the pattern that represents the idea of the number 7. It could even be a reasoning object, like a little mental tool you use to solve a problem. But, and this is super important for the theory, it also includes one very special kind of object, a monitoring object.
Okay, so we've got all the pieces on the table, right? We have the hardware, the middleware, and this big software library, the object model. But that still leaves the biggest question of all. Where does the actual feeling of being conscious come from? Where's the experience?
And here it is. This is the theory's big answer. Buried inside that huge software library, a very specialized program comes online. It's called the monitor object, and its only job is to watch the other parts of the software. It's observing your trains of thought, your memories playing back, all the data coming in from your senses. It's basically the brain's own internal observer. But here's the absolute kicker, the big twist. This monitor, it isn't just watching the show from the audience. No. According to this theory, the monitor is the show. The actual functioning of this one piece of software, that process of monitoring, is the subjective experience of consciousness. To put it in the theory's own words, this monitor object creates the experience of your thoughts, the experience of your brain processing information. See, it's not some little guy sitting in a control room in your head. The process of monitoring itself,
That's what it feels like to be you.
Okay, so if consciousness is just a really clever piece of software, that brings up the question everyone is asking these days, right? What about computers? Can we build a conscious AI? Let's use this model we've just built as a kind of test case and see what it tells us. Right off the bat, this theory points out a massive difference between us and them. The human brain runs on software that can innovate on its own, where one thought directly and seamlessly flows into the next. Computers, on the other hand, they're basically just discrete calculators. They need an external clock, tick, tock, to go from one state to the next. They're missing that continuous self-referential loop that we have.
So based on this theory, what would an AI need to do to become conscious? Well, first, it'd have to somehow get over its fundamental nature as a step-by-step calculator. Then, it would need to grow a software layer that could actually innovate and change itself. And finally, and this is the real doozy, it would have to spontaneously develop its very own monitor object, just like we did through evolution. And that's not something you can just sit down and code.
And when you stack up all those monumental hurdles, the theory's conclusion is pretty blunt. It basically says, don't hold your breath. We are not likely to see a truly conscious machine anytime soon, or perhaps ever. So we're left with this really fascinating paradox, aren't we? On one hand, this theory makes consciousness seem like a solvable problem. I mean, it's just a special kind of software, right? But on the other hand, it suggests that this software, born from billions of years of biology, is a program that writes itself. And that leaves us with a really big final thought. Can a code that writes itself ever truly be written by anyone else?